Today we're going to be diving into the Ethico 2024 Hotline and Investigation Management Benchmark Report. You are on a compliance journey. It's a game of continuous improvement. Stacking up incremental wins really do multiply over time, and these are the metrics that you want to look at to chart your progress and set goals for that continuous improvement. Let's dive in. Our job in ethics and compliance is to crowdsource risk intelligence at scale from the human sensors within our organization, provide insights back to the point of risk, and de-risk our organization by building a culture of authentic integrity. Case closure time is a critical metric to monitor and measure because it indicates the efficiency of your investigation process. The rule of thumb is to close your cases as fast as possible, but no faster. Sometimes you're going to have something that's aged long, but a goal of closing your cases in 30 days is a great place to start. If you look at these numbers from the benchmark report, the case closure time has dropped from 28 days in 2019 down to 23 days, almost a full work week over the last couple of years. And that's coincided with improvements to the platform. When smart people who care, who have a unique skill set, i.e. ethics and compliance folks, ethics and compliance investigators in particular, when they can spend more of their time putting that unique skill set to work for their task as opposed to working for a tool that requires a lot of manual work, we start to see really impressive movements in these metrics. If we flip this sideways though, and we look at the distribution, this tells a very interesting story. You can see that last year, over 80% of cases were closed in less than 30 days, with only 4% closed in that over 90-day bucket. Again, we want to pull as much as we can into that 0 to 30-day bucket and really let only those most complex cases that require an extended period of time live out in those 60 and 90-day buckets. So take a look at the distribution of your case closure times across different categories and across these different aging buckets to look for trends for improvement. My favorite tip for optimizing case closure time is to consider your investigation process as a business process. Breaking that down into its individual steps will allow you to identify potential bottlenecks that are preventing more throughput from running through your investigation system. So look for those bottlenecks and ways to optimize around those, and that's going to increase a lot of capacity potential for your investigation team. Issue anonymity is so critical because it is a barometer for broad cultural health. It's a barometer for the broad level of trust from the employee base toward your organization. Whatever you can do to optimize your anonymous rate will lead to faster case closure time, higher substantiation rate, and overall more health in your investigation process. Over the last several years, we've seen a significant increase in our identified rate. 72% of reporters last year identified themselves versus 56% at the status quo. The key to driving down your anonymous rate is building an authentic speak up culture based in psychological safety that is human-centric. Providing anonymous options and letting people know that these protections are in place is not only going to increase your reporting rate, but it also allows for another interaction point with all the human sensors in your organization to display your commitment to a culture of integrity and stamping out retaliation. Measuring your reporting channel use can give you indications on where there might be more opportunities for improvement. There are three main reporting channels: web, hotline, and in-person. In 2023, the average reporting rate across the entire data set was 3.6 reports per 100 compared to 1.5 at the status quo. About 56% or 2 out of the 3.6 reports per 100 came in through the hotline. And while hotline has seen a decline from the peak in COVID, it still remains a dominant channel. For some issues, people just want to talk to another human being to get those questions answered. So optimizing that channel is absolutely a key. Jumping up to the top, we can see that about 20% of the reports came in through the web. The web is going to continue to be a growing channel over the next decade. And the key here is to optimize that intake experience, make it human-centric, and make it easy for people to report. So if you can make it an easy form that also has dynamic logic to ensure that you get the information you need to hit the ground running for your investigation, that's kind of the happy medium of what we're trying to balance. The real story, though, is this middle category, the in-person. We know that 65% of people saw wrongdoing last year. We know that people are 6 to 8 times more likely to go to their middle managers, and we are looking at a bottom line number of 3.6 to 1.5 reports per 100. There are orders of magnitude more reports in your organization, and the best place to look is at this middle manager level. Setting managers up with proxy forms, giving them an activation kit so that they can not only echo your messaging to their teams, but also serve as a conduit and serve as a healthy channel for more risk intelligence will allow you to focus your efforts on those things that matter most. Issue categories are a critical tool for you to organize your work and direct your efforts in the right way and notice trends of how things might be changing from a risk mitigation perspective within your organization. Last year, we saw significant drops in 2 categories. HR dropped by about 2% and environmental health and safety dropped by about 3%. Those were offset by increases in compliance, in customer relations and business quality, in fraud, and in discrimination and harassment. So look at your fluctuations year over year and try to figure out what drove those changes. Was it something external to the organization? Was it something in the headlines? Was there a significant event that occurred in your organization? We want to be able to explain significant fluctuations and ensure that we are directing our resources in the right way. You want to design your categories year over year to give you the insights you need about culture, about risk, about policies that may need to change. So considering those categories and considering massive fluctuations can allow you to direct your efforts toward new risk areas that you might not be considering. Issue severity indicates the proportion of your cases that are severe. Severe cases are split into two main categories: urgent and non-urgent. What you can see is that about 15% of cases were considered severe in 2023. After moving out of the COVID area, we've seen this metric revert back to the historical levels. The key to letting severities work for you is to ensure first that your severity criteria are dialed in, and second, to ensure that the highest risk items get attention first. So properly utilizing severity criteria, ratings in your triage and in your case management system can help you direct your efforts more quickly to those most risky items. Issue substantiation indicates the proportion of your cases where you are able to substantiate the allegation. Issue substantiation dropped to a low of 51% during 2021 in the thick of COVID and has now started to revert back to historical levels, albeit at a slower rate than some of the other mean reversions in other metrics. The key to optimizing your substantiation rate is ensuring that your investigation process and your interview tactics are of high quality. Many times a low substantiation rate can be traced back to an initial discovery or an initial conversation where not enough details were gathered. When we have good intake, when we have good forms, and when those initial interviews are done properly, we have a much higher chance of driving that substantiation rate lower in a sustainable way. If our job is to gather risk intelligence at scale across our organization, we need to be agnostic about where that risk intelligence is coming from. In 2020 and 2021, we saw a significant expansion in the proportion of reports that were coming from related parties. For example, a spouse or a significant other. That proportion has maintained, interestingly, as we've come out of a work from home world in this post-COVID era. However, employees still remain A, the biggest source of risk intelligence potential throughout our organization, and B, still the largest source of reporting. Across related parties and employees, those account for about 90% of reports in 2023. Our company was built by compliance consultants with a focus on quality and with a drive to do things right. Abandonment rate is an absolute killer for many organizations, and most folks don't even really know that it's happening. Essentially, your abandonment rate shows the proportion of reports that don't wind up in your inbox. These are things that are abandoned halfway through the reporting process. Over the last 36 months, Ethico's abandonment rate has averaged below 1%. We have found that people are 8 times more likely to complete a report when they are answered live by a human being. And it's very critical that they feel like the risk they are taking in raising their hand and facing potential retaliation is honored. And the best way to do that is treating those people like human beings, answering their calls live, allowing them to ask their questions, versus leaving them on a call queue for 25 minutes listening to careless whisper and being told by a disembodied voice that their call is very important to them before being raced off the phone by an intake specialist that is getting compensated on call handle time. That is not the way you would probably build an intake process, and it's important that whatever extension, whoever you're relying on to be an extension of your program or be a representative of you to the workforce whose engagement you need to do your job, is cooking your dish the way you want. If you're subject to an average abandonment rate, your reporting rate could be 15 to 20% higher. That's a significant amount of risk intelligence that you're not even seeing. How can you optimize your intake process to make sure that the experience that the employee has is in line with what your expectations are and in line with the type of organization that you're trying to build? How do people know how to report, and how do they know where to report? Analyzing your reporter awareness trends can give you good insights on which awareness channels you want to optimize. Some interesting trends have developed over the last couple of years. The first one is internet as an awareness source has skyrocketed to almost 60%. That means 60% of the reports came from reporter awareness derived from the internet. During that same time, printed materials as a proportion of reporter awareness dropped from 25% to less than 15%. The biggest category though, the biggest opportunity is the word of mouth category, which represented almost 1 in 5 reports last year. You need to optimize the intake process in order to make sure that whatever word of mouth is happening is conducive to more reports. People are going to talk about their experience, and that is going to be shared with the people on their team and the other people in your organization. Do whatever you can to make sure that that experience is the true representation of the type of employee experience you're trying to build. That can only create more tailwinds for more reports, more risk intelligence for you to respond to. Issue sequence is a metric that gives you a glimpse into the proportion of your reports that are original issues versus the proportion that are follow-ups. Last year, less than 15% of the reports in our data set were follow-ups versus about 27% for the status quo. At the end of the day, you're always going to have follow-ups because you're always going to have anonymous reporters, and there's always going to be additional information you're going to need to gather in pursuit of your substantiation of your investigation. The key here is getting as much good information you can on the front end, signaling to the reporters the type of information you need, and utilizing your case management system to communicate with anonymous reporters. If your follow-up rate is too high, there is usually an indication that your cases are either not getting closed fast enough or there's not ample communication back to the reporter. The last thing you want to do is leave a culture guardian out in the dark. Communicating back to the reporters, coupled with getting better information on the front end, can not only drive down your case closure time, but it also can drive down your follow-up rate. We want to minimize the amount of time that we're wasting, and many times with follow-ups, it is due to a mismanaged expectation on the reporter side. So simply following up with reporters, giving them an indication of what this process is going to look like through infographics or FAQs, and gathering the right information on the front end can do a lot to drive down your case closure time and ultimately drive down your follow-up rate. Our job in ethics and compliance is to crowdsource risk intelligence and provide insights back at the point of risk. We can never do that if we're not getting that risk intelligence. So that means we need the participation of the workforce to share those risk items with us so that we can respond to them. The point is, there is 6 to 18 times more reports out there than you are getting. There's a lot of risk intelligence out there. We want to get more of it so that we can demonstrate our value and we can make the impact that we're set to make. Last year, the Ethico data set showed a reporting rate of 3.6 reports per 100 employees, compared to 1.5 at the status quo. That 3.6 reports per 100 ranged from two reports per 100 on the large enterprise side, and on up to 8 reports per 100 on the SMB side. Look at your historical trends and benchmark against those and benchmark against your peers on an organizational basis and see where there's room for improvement. There's 6 to 18 times more points of risk intelligence in your organization than you're not getting. That's orders of magnitude. So there's a lot more opportunity out there. And again, making small tweaks to your program, making small tweaks to how you interact with the workforce can lead to outsized impact and outsized leverage in terms of risk management and risk mitigation in your organization. You can find all this information and more on the Ethico 2024 benchmark report. Go to ethico.com and download it for free today.